OSHA initially holds general contractors responsible for ensuring the safety of subcontractor workers on job sites. Builders and subcontractor associations have challenged this policy, arguing that contractors should only be responsible for their own employees' safety. OSHA contends that multi-employer liability applies, making contractors responsible even if subcontractors create unsafe conditions. This means subcontractors need to be aware that OSHA may hold them liable for safety violations, even if they are not the employer of the violating workers. Subcontractors should prioritize job site safety and cooperate with general contractors to ensure a safe work environment for all workers. The OSHA Commission was expected to release a decision on the validity of OSHA's policy in April 2007. Understanding the nuances of OSHA's multi-employer citation policy is crucial for all parties involved in construction projects. The policy allows OSHA to cite more than one employer for a hazardous condition if each employer meets certain criteria. To fully grasp this policy, it's important to define key terms. A creating employer is one who caused the hazardous condition that violates an OSHA standard. An exposing employer is one whose own employees are exposed to the hazard. A correcting employer is one who has the responsibility for actually correcting the hazard, either because they created it or because of their explicit authority to do so. A controlling employer is one who has general supervisory authority over the worksite, including the power to correct safety and health violations themselves or require others to correct them. Now let's delve into how OSHA applies these categories. OSHA can cite a creating employer if they created a hazard that violates OSHA standards regardless of whether their own employees are exposed to the hazard. The exposing employer can be cited if their employees are exposed to the hazard. However, there's an exception if the exposing employer meets certain conditions. They did not create the hazard, they did not have the responsibility or the authority to have the hazard corrected. They have taken appropriate steps to protect their employees from the hazard, and they have requested the controlling employer to correct the hazard. The correcting employer can be cited if they are responsible for correcting the hazard and fail to do so. The controlling employer is generally expected by OSHA to exercise reasonable care to prevent and detect violations in the site. The extent of the controlling employer's duties depends on the scope of its control. For instance, if the controlling employer has the authority to correct hazards, they must do so. If they only have the authority to require others to correct hazards, they must ensure that those responsible for correction do so. To avoid citations under the multi-employer citation policy, employers need to take proactive steps. Creating employers should ensure that their actions do not create hazards for other workers in the site. Exposing employers should protect their employees from hazards and, if possible, have the hazard corrected. Correcting employers must promptly correct any hazards they are responsible for. Controlling employers must implement and maintain a comprehensive safety and health program that includes regular inspections, hazard identification, and prompt correction of hazards. It's essential for employers to understand their roles and responsibilities under the multi-employer citation policy to ensure a safe work environment for all employees on a construction site. Remember that state OSHA plans may have their own versions of multi-employer policies which could be more stringent than the federal OSHA policy. Understanding OSHA fall protection requirements for construction is essential for ensuring worker safety. Falls are a leading cause of fatalities in the construction industry, so adhering to OSHA standards is crucial. OSHA's fall protection standard for construction, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1926.501, outlines specific requirements for various work scenarios. For unprotected sides and edges, fall protection is required when employees are working at heights of 6 feet or more above a lower level. Acceptable fall protection methods include guardrail systems, safety net systems, or personal fall arrest systems. When working on scaffolds, fall protection is required at heights of 10 feet or more above a lower level. Guardrails, personal fall arrest systems, or a combination of both are typically used. For steel erection activities, specific fall protection requirements apply depending on the height and type of work being performed. Workers connecting structural members must be protected by fall arrest systems at heights of 15 feet or more. When working on roofs, full protection is required for employees engaged in roofing activities on low-slope roofs with unprotected sides and edges 6 feet or more above lower levels. Acceptable methods include guardrail systems, safety net systems, personal fall arrest systems, or a combination of these. When using ladders, employees must maintain 3 points of contact at all times. Ladders must extend at least 3 feet above the landing surface, and employees should not carry objects that could cause them to lose balance. Personal fall arrest systems consist of an anchorage point, a body harness, and a connecting device such as a lanyard or lifeline. The anchorage point must be capable of supporting at least 5,000 pounds per employee attached or designed by a qualified person. Body harnesses must be properly fitted and inspected before each use. Lanyards and lifelines must be in good condition and compatible with the other components of the system. Guardrail systems must be capable of withstanding a force of at least 200 pounds applied in a downward or outward direction at the top edge. The top rail must be 42 inches plus or minus 3 inches above the walking or working level. Midrails, screens, mesh, or other intermediate structural members must be installed between the top rail and the walking or working level. Safety net systems must be installed as close as practicable to the walking or working surface, and never more than 30 feet below that level. The nets must be drop tested before use to ensure they can adequately catch falling objects or workers. Employers are required to provide training to employees on fall hazards and fall protection systems. Training must cover topics such as hazard recognition, proper use of fall protection equipment, and the requirements of the OSHA fall protection standard. Regular inspections of fall protection equipment and work areas are essential to identify and correct hazards. Damaged or defective equipment must be removed from service immediately. Employers must develop and implement a written fall protection plan that outlines the procedures and equipment to be used to protect workers from fall hazards. This plan should be specific to the work being performed and the site conditions. It's important to stay up to date on OSHA's fall protection requirements, as they may be updated or revised from time to time. Consulting with a safety professional or OSHA representative can help ensure compliance and promote a safe work environment. Understanding electrical safety on construction sites is paramount to prevent injuries and fatalities. Electricity poses significant hazards, so implementing robust safety measures is crucial. OSHA's electrical safety standards for construction, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1926 Subpart K, outline specific requirements for electrical work practices and equipment. Firstly, all electrical equipment and wiring must be properly grounded to provide a safe path for fault current to flow back to the source. Grounding helps prevent electrical shock and minimizes the risk of fire. Ground fault circuit interrupters, known as GFCIs, are required for all 120-volt single-phase receptacles that are not part of the permanent wiring of the building or structure and are in use by employees. GFCIs protect workers from electrical shock by quickly interrupting the circuit when a ground fault is detected. Overhead power lines pose a significant hazard on construction sites. Employers must ensure that equipment and materials are kept at a safe distance from power lines to prevent contact. OSHA specifies minimum clearance distances based on the voltage of the power line. Before any work is performed near power lines, the lines must be de-energized or guarded to prevent accidental contact. Lockout-tagout procedures are essential for safely de-energizing electrical equipment before maintenance or repair work is performed. These procedures involve isolating the electrical energy source, applying a lock to the disconnecting device, and tagging the device to warn others not to re-energize the equipment. Only qualified persons are allowed to perform electrical work on construction sites. Qualified persons have the necessary training and experience to safely work on electrical systems and equipment. They must be able to recognize and avoid electrical hazards. Electrical cords and equipment must be inspected regularly for damage or defects. Damaged cords should be removed from service immediately to prevent electrical shock or fire. Electrical panels and enclosures must be kept closed and properly labeled to prevent unauthorized access and ensure proper operation. Ensure sufficient access and working space around all electrical equipment. This allows workers to safely operate and maintain the equipment. Employers are required to provide training to employees on electrical hazards and safe work practices. Training should cover topics such as hazard recognition, grounding, GFCI protection, lockout-tagout procedures, and safe use of electrical equipment. Regular inspections of electrical equipment and work areas are essential to identify and correct hazards. Any unsafe conditions must be addressed promptly. Employers must develop and implement a written electrical safety program that outlines the procedures and equipment to be used to protect workers from electrical hazards. This program should be specific to the work being performed and the site conditions. Staying up to date on OSHA's electrical safety requirements is important, as they may be updated or revised from time to time. Consulting with a safety professional or OSHA representative can help ensure compliance and promote a safe work environment. Regarding personal protective equipment, often referred to as PPE, construction workers need various types to safeguard against hazards. Hard hats are essential for protecting the head from falling objects and impact. Eye protection, such as safety glasses or goggles, is needed to shield the eyes from dust, debris, and chemical splashes. Hearing protection, including earplugs or earmuffs, is necessary to reduce exposure to loud noises. Gloves protect hands from cuts, abrasions, and chemical exposure. Safety boots with steel toes protect feet from impact and compression hazards. High visibility clothing, such as vests or jackets, ensures workers are easily seen by others, especially in low light conditions. Respirators protect workers from inhaling harmful dust, fumes, and gases. The type of respirator needed depends on the specific hazard. Fall protection equipment, like harnesses and lanyards, prevents falls from heights. Selecting the right PPE is crucial. Employers must conduct a hazard assessment to identify potential dangers and determine the appropriate PPE for each task. PPE must fit properly and be comfortable to wear. Ill-fitting PPE can be ineffective or create additional hazards. Workers must be trained on how to properly use and maintain PPE. Training should cover topics such as donning, doffing, inspecting, and storing PPE. PPE should be inspected regularly for damage or defects. Damaged or defective PPE must be replaced immediately. Employers are responsible for providing PPE to employees and ensuring that it is used properly. Workers are responsible for using PPE as instructed and reporting any problems with the equipment. OSHA standards require employers to provide and ensure the use of appropriate PPE. Failure to do so can result in citations and penalties. By properly selecting, using, and maintaining PPE, construction workers can significantly reduce their risk of injury on the job. Now let's address hazard communication. Hazard communication, often referred to as HazCom, ensures that employees are informed about the chemical hazards they may encounter in the workplace. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1910.1200, requires employers to provide information and training to employees about hazardous chemicals. A written hazard communication program is a must. Employers must develop and implement a written hazard communication program that describes how they will comply with the Hazard Communication Standard. This program should include information on hazard assessment, labeling, safety data sheets, and employee training. Chemical inventories are required. Employers must maintain a list of all hazardous chemicals present in the workplace. Safety data sheets, or SDS, formerly known as Materials Safety Data Sheets, provide detailed information about hazardous chemicals, including their properties, hazards, and safe handling procedures. Employers must maintain SDS for all hazardous chemicals in the workplace and ensure that they are readily accessible to employees. Labels on chemical containers must be clear, legible, and in English. Labels must include the name of the chemical, hazard warnings, and the name and address of the manufacturer or importer. Employee training is essential. Employers must provide training to employees on the hazards of chemicals in the workplace and how to protect themselves. Training should cover topics such as hazard recognition, SDSs, labeling, and safe handling procedures. The hazard communication standard applies to all workplaces where employees may be exposed to hazardous chemicals. Employees have the right to know about the chemical hazards they may encounter in the workplace. Employers must provide access to SDS and training to ensure that employees are informed. Regular reviews of the hazard communication program are necessary to ensure that it remains effective. Updates should be made as needed to reflect changes in chemical inventories or work practices. By implementing a comprehensive hazard communication program, employers can help protect employees from chemical hazards and ensure a safe work environment. Moving on, we have excavation safety. Excavations pose significant risks to workers, including cave-ins, falling loads, and equipment hazards. OSHA's excavation standard, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1926 Subpart P, outlines specific requirements for excavation work. A competent person must be designated. A competent person must be designated to inspect excavations and identify potential hazards. The competent person must have the training and experience necessary to make informed decisions about excavation safety. Soil classification is crucial. Soil must be classified to determine its stability and the appropriate protective systems needed. OSHA recognizes 4 soil types: stable rock, type A, type B, and type C. Protective systems are essential to prevent cave-ins. Protective systems include sloping, shoring, and shielding. The type of protective system needed depends on the soil type, excavation depth, and other factors. Sloping involves cutting back the excavation walls at an angle to create a stable slope. Shoring involves installing supports such as timbers or aluminum hydraulic shoring to prevent cave-ins. Shielding involves using trench boxes or other protective structures to shield workers from cave-ins. Underground utilities must be located and marked before excavation begins. This helps prevent damage to utilities and ensures worker safety. Safe access and egress must be provided to and from the excavation. This may include ladders, stairs, or ramps. Inspections of excavations must be conducted daily and after any rainstorms or other events that could affect soil stability. Inspections must be performed by a competent person. Water accumulation in excavations must be controlled to prevent instability and hazards. Employees must be trained on excavation hazards and safe work practices. Training should cover topics such as soil classification, protective systems, and emergency procedures. The excavation standard applies to all excavations, including trenches. Employers must comply with the requirements of the standard to protect workers from excavation hazards. By following safe excavation practices, employers can significantly reduce the risk of cave-ins and other excavation-related injuries. Furthermore, let's discuss crane safety. Cranes are essential equipment on many construction sites, but they also pose significant risks if not operated safely. OSHA's crane standard, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1926 Subpart CC, outlines specific requirements for crane operation. Qualified and certified operators are a must. Crane operators must be qualified and certified to operate the specific type of crane they are using. Certification ensures that operators have the necessary knowledge and skills to operate cranes safely. Crane inspections are required. Cranes must be inspected regularly to ensure they are in safe operating condition. Inspections must be performed by a competent person. Load charts provide information on the crane's lifting capacity at various radii. Operators must understand and follow the load chart to prevent overloading the crane. Safe load rigging is essential. Loads must be properly rigged to ensure they are stable and secure. Rigging equipment must be inspected before each use. Power line safety is crucial. Cranes must be operated at a safe distance from power lines to prevent electrocution. OSHA specifies minimum clearance distances based on the voltage of the power line. Ground conditions matter. Cranes must be operated on stable ground to prevent tipping. Outriggers or stabilizers must be used to provide additional stability. Clear communication between the operator and the signal person is required to ensure safe lifting operations. Hand signals or radio communication may be used. Employees must be trained on crane hazards and safe work practices. Training should cover topics such as crane operation, load rigging, and power line safety. The crane standard applies to all cranes used in construction. Employers must comply with the requirements of the standard to protect workers from crane-related hazards. By following safe crane operating practices, employers can significantly reduce the risk of crane accidents and injuries. A critical component to safety is fire protection and prevention. Fire is a serious hazard on construction sites. Implementing effective fire protection and prevention measures is essential to protect workers and property. OSHA's Fire Protection Standard, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1926 Subpart F, outlines specific requirements for fire safety. A fire prevention program must be in place. Employers must develop and implement a fire prevention program that includes procedures for preventing fires, controlling fire hazards, and training employees on fire safety. Fire extinguishers must be readily available and properly maintained. The type and number of fire extinguishers needed depend on the types of materials present and the potential fire hazards. Fire extinguishers must be inspected regularly to ensure they are in good working order. Fire alarms and detection systems should be installed in areas where fires are likely to occur. These systems provide early warning of a fire, allowing workers to evacuate safely. Emergency evacuation plans are crucial. Employers must develop and implement emergency evacuation plans that include procedures for evacuating the site, accounting for all employees, and contacting emergency services. Flammable and combustible materials must be stored properly to prevent fires. These materials should be stored in approved containers and away from ignition sources. Smoking should be restricted to designated areas to prevent fires. Smoking should not be allowed near flammable or combustible materials. Hot work operations, such as welding and cutting, pose a fire hazard. Precautions must be taken to prevent fires during these operations, including using fire-resistant blankets and having a fire watch. Employees must be trained on fire hazards and safe work practices. Training should cover topics such as fire prevention, fire extinguisher use, and emergency evacuation procedures. Fire protection standard applies to all construction sites. Employers must comply with the requirements of the standard to protect workers from fire hazards. By implementing effective fire protection and prevention measures, employers can significantly reduce the risk of fires and protect workers and property. Next is machine guarding. Unguarded machinery poses a significant hazard to workers. Machine guarding is essential to protect workers from injuries caused by moving parts. OSHA's machine guarding standard, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1910.212, outlines specific requirements for machine guarding. Point of operation guarding is critical. The point of operation is the area where the machine performs its intended task. Guards must be installed to prevent workers from reaching into the point of operation. Power transmission guarding is essential. Belts, pulleys, gears, and other power transmission components must be guarded to prevent workers from being caught in or struck by these moving parts. Location guarding can be used in some cases. If a machine is located in an area that is inaccessible to workers, it may not need to be guarded. However, this is only acceptable if workers are not exposed to any hazards from the machine. Awareness devices, such as signs and signals, can be used to warn workers of potential hazards. However, awareness devices should not be used as a substitute for physical guards. Employees must be trained on machine hazards and safe work practices. Training should cover topics such as machine guarding, lockout-tagout procedures, and safe operating procedures. Regular inspections of machines are necessary. Machines must be inspected regularly to ensure that guards are in place and functioning properly. Lockout-tagout procedures are essential. Machines must be de-energized and locked out before any maintenance or repair work is performed. The machine guarding standard applies to all machines in the workplace. Employers must comply with the requirements of the standard to protect workers from machine-related injuries. By implementing effective machine guarding measures, employers can significantly reduce the risk of injuries caused by moving machinery parts. Finally, we'll review confined space entry. Confined spaces pose unique hazards to workers due to their limited access, poor ventilation, and potential for hazardous atmospheres. OSHA's confined space standard, found in 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1910.146, outlines specific requirements for confined space entry. A confined space is defined as a space that is large enough for an employee to enter and perform work, has limited or restricted means for entry or exit, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. Permit-required confined spaces contain or have the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, contain a material that could engulf an entrant, or have other serious safety or health hazards. A written confined space program is crucial. Employers must develop and implement a written confined space program that includes procedures for identifying confined spaces, evaluating hazards, and controlling risks. Hazard identification and evaluation is key. All confined spaces must be evaluated to determine if they are permit-required confined spaces. Atmospheric testing is essential. The atmosphere inside a confined space must be tested before entry to ensure that it is safe for workers. The atmosphere must be tested for oxygen content, flammable gases or vapors, and toxic air contaminants. Entry permits are required for permit-required confined spaces. The entry permit must identify the hazards present in the confined space and the measures that will be taken to control those hazards. Attendants must be stationed outside the confined space to monitor the entrance and provide assistance if needed. Rescue procedures must be in place. Employers must have rescue procedures in place to safely remove entrants from the confined space in the event of an emergency. Employees must be trained on confined space hazards and safe entry procedures. Training should cover topics such as hazard recognition, atmospheric testing, permit procedures, and rescue procedures. The confined space standard applies to all workplaces where employees may enter confined spaces. Employers must comply with the requirements of the standard to protect workers from confined space hazards. By following safe confined space entry procedures, employers can significantly reduce the risk of injuries and fatalities associated with confined space work.